You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. With more than 30 weekly podcasts, HRN has something for every food lover. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org.
This episode is brought to you by 818 Tequila. Handcrafted, expert approved, with over 20 international blind tasting awards. 818 Tequila, imported by 818 Spirits, Manhasset, New York, 40% alcohol by volume. Drink responsibly.
Welcome to Pizza Quest. I'm Peter Reinhardt, a man on a never-ending search for the perfect pizza. This show is the audio version of the Pizza Talk YouTube series, where I engage in interesting conversations with some of the country's greatest pizza makers and other artisans. Thanks for joining me on this quest. Welcome to Pizza Quest. I'm Peter Reinhardt, and I'm here with Chef Jihye Kim of Miss Kim's Restaurant in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We're going to take a little bit of a veering today from pizza. We've been exploring in this season a lot of non-pizza themes because the bigger theme for Pizza Quest, as many of you know, have been with us from the beginning, is that it's not always about the pizza, it's about the quest. And the reason that I wanted to, spend some time with Jihye is that she is doing something really extraordinary in Ann Arbor. It's all around her own Korean heritage and her Korean food, but she didn't start out as a Korean chef or a culinarian or anything. So she's had her own amazing journey, and that's what I want to hear about. So welcome, Jihye, and thank you for being part of our show today.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
So I'll just do a quick setup, and then I'm going to let you go because I would love for you to just tell us your journey. You grew up in I think you were born in Korea, but then moved to Canada first, and then eventually were raised in, if I'm not mistaken, like New Jersey. Am I right about that?
No, straight to United States. Yeah, New Jersey. So yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But you were in Jersey, and then ultimately ended up at the University of Michigan. And,
I did.
And you studied some things that were not related to food whatsoever. But so tell us a little bit about sort of that early part and how you ended up at Michigan, and how being at Michigan at UM sort of then led to a couple twists and turns in your own interesting career development.
Sure. Yeah, like you said, I was born and raised in Korea. I came to United States, to Garden State, New Jersey, when I was 13. And then I ended up in Michigan because I went to University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. I studied political science and economics, which I would wager has a lot to do with the restaurant industry indirectly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you're connecting those dots in your own career, which, as we'll get into a little bit later. But yes, there's no question they're intricately, enmeshed.
Yeah. And then I actually didn't stay in Ann Arbor after I graduated. I moved back to New Jersey. I had a full career in hospital administration, working with the patients, doctors, boards, insurance companies. Did that for a while. I ended up moving back to Ann Arbor because when I was in Ann Arbor, I had met a boy, and then I had come back for him.
There's always a guy in these stories somewhere.
You got to follow your heart. Yeah. And then once I came to Michigan, that's when I sort of like took the opportunity to again, the theme is follow my heart. So to try something different. And then that's how I ended up in a food industry in general. And then like 10 years after, I have my own restaurant.
But you didn't, use the sort of the current customary route, which is a lot of people go through culinary school or apprenticed for years in restaurants somewhere else. You pretty much, when I sort of look at your story, I view you as an intuitive cook, an intuitive chef, in that you figured it out. You figured a lot of these things out on your own. Of course, you had, I'm sure, some culinary nurturing at home with family recipes and heritage recipes and things like that. But you, I think if I'm not mistaken, you ended up going to work at Zingerman's, which is an iconic food emporium in Ann Arbor. I put it up there with I don't know, Trader Joe's and some of the other iconic brands.
Buy Right in San Francisco comes to mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Zabar's in New York City.
Yeah.
I mean, people equate Zingerman's with brands like that because they stand for something. And Zingerman's, is always since it's come into existence. And the last time I was in Ann Arbor and I was a young man, there was no Zingerman's. So, but it seems like it's been there forever. And I guess it's probably been there 30, 40 years, but that tells you how long it's been since I've been in Ann Arbor. But the thing is that Zingerman stands for quality ingredients, sourcing and finding really, amazing products that nobody else is finding, whether you get it through their mail order or you go to the mother house and shop. You ended up working there, right? And so did you get some of your formative training just working the counter at Zingerman's?
Yeah. I mean, like, I first want to go back a step and say that there was no family heritage recipes that handed out to me.
Really?
Because what I did get is a really good palate, because my mom is an amazing cook and she's the best cook in the family, but she didn't want to really teach me. She wanted me to have an office job. She didn't want me to have a job where I'm going to be on my feet all day. And more than office job, she wanted me to get married. And then she was very confident that once I get married, I'll somehow magically figure out the cooking part. So she didn't bother teaching me, but I had a lot of practice eating. So, which is a good place to start, having a good palate. Yeah. So that's a good baseline for me. And then once I joined Zingerman's, I think you're absolutely right about their sourcing. And, we talk a lot about farm to table and sourcing locally, but I think my education at Zingerman's is a bit different, because you think about artisans as well as the land and the quality of the products that come from those artisans. So you can have, if you know about balsamic vinegar, this is sort of oxymoron, but you can have locally made balsamic vinegar that's okay. A true, real, high quality, amazing balsamic vinegar is made by families in Modena from mothers that's been handed down generations. And then they do things in the way that they've learned from their family, and then perhaps making like intentional updates to it that does not interfere that much with the tradition. Mm-hmm. So like working with Zingerman sort of gave me appreciation for that kind of work, that kind of like long range work, right? So it's not an instant gratification kind of work. It's a really dedication to what they do. And it also gave me a good education on developing professional palate. Mm-hmm. So a good example would be that like I did not grow up eating cereal. So when somebody's really excited about cereal flavor, it just kind of goes over my head. But if I have a really good one, good cereal milk or soft serve or good peanut butter, even though I didn't grow up with it, I can recognize it, because the education on artisanal products, processes, and then really being able to identify a well-made product came from working with Zingerman's and my experience there.
It's interesting because, a lot of people were in the, sort of become foodies in the last few years. They take a lot of this information for granted. They feel like, oh yeah, it's obvious. It's, we should all know this. But when Zingerman started, it took companies like Zingerman's to bring that kind of knowledge to the American public. Back in 30 years ago, very few people thought about artisanal foods. They thought about or sourcing or, what is true balsamic vinegar. I mean, we had to learn all of that. Now that's all now becoming part of our gastronomical, growth curve here in this country. But we didn't grow up with that kind of growth curve. Maybe in your generation a little bit more, because you came into it through companies and like some of the other ones we mentioned who were part of bringing that knowledge and awareness. And then there's the food channels and all sorts of other media that has educated this country. You don't have to go to culinary school to learn these things. You can just turn on, one of the food channels and get a crash course in all this now. But it's really, a gift to this current generation that knowledge is so readily available. And you had to, sort of absorb it, but you were lucky enough to absorb it at the counter at a place like Zingerman's where you could do tastings and things like that.
Yeah, I think the currently it's almost like information overload. So it's a blessing that there's so much information readily available. But then if you don't know exactly what you're looking for, or you are not sure what the standards are, where to start, then that could be really challenging. But Zingerman's provides some sort of guideline for that.
That as you said that, it made me think that we went through a phase of discovery about food. There's all these aha moments, like, wow, I didn't know something could taste that good, or that there was a product, a cereal that could blow my mind, and all that kind of stuff. And everything was new and exciting. And now it's not so new and exciting. And you always have to, and yet people are always hungry for what's next, what's the next thing, what's the next big thing. And you start to wonder, when you say information overload, it's like, are there new frontiers still left to discover? And I wonder, if your restaurant, Miss Kim, is essentially grew out of a food cart that you had for a while, where you were doing street food. You had phases that you went through to bring yourself to the point where you could open your own restaurant. What do you find today? Because now Miss Kim is, it's on the James Beard radar. It's becoming nationally known. It's becoming, significant. It stands for something. And I want to talk a little bit about what Miss Kim does stand for, because what it stands for is important to answer this question about, like, what's left, what can continue to get us excited about food as a sort of a discovery process. We say Pizza Quest is a journey of self-discovery through pizza, but really it's a journey of self-discovery, no matter what your metaphor, for the journey is. In your sense, you could say it's a journey of self-discovery through Korean food, but it's really more than that. Where do you see sort of the excitement that you're bringing to people when they encounter your food?
Well, I think there's still so much to be discovered. And my way of my direction has been going like narrow and deeper. Like you dig deeper and deeper and deeper. And like more I look into Korean food, that I realize I know nothing. Like there's still so much to find. Yeah. And, just like you said, the motivation behind it is very much self-discovery, right? Because I am in Michigan, away from large Korean American community, away from my mother's cooking. It did start out sort of like a way of looking for myself here and looking for my community here. And then it had evolved into something a little bigger, being able to find my identity in America as an immigrant. Yeah. And in order for me to do that, how do I do that? I need to know the story. Like, what is my story? And how does that connect to where I am? And how does that connect to the story of my my ancestors and generations? And it sounds really sort of like heavy, but it's really not. It's a lot of fun. Like if I go to farmers market, then I talk to the farmers who's been here for 100 years, whose family has been coming to the farmers market for 100 years, then I can sort of like, talk to them and see, like start imagining, like, if my grandma was here and was talking to Carlene the farmer, what would she do? Would she barter? Would she like, pick Carlene's brain on how she cooks things, and then like get ideas on how to buy Carlene's vegetables and then cook it at home? And so for me, it came down to really just being able to tell the story and then finding myself in it. And I think, one of my favorite writers, Roger Ebert, the great movie reviewer, film critic, and he has said that the more specific the story goes, the more universal it becomes. Yes. So I sort of feel that the more I dig deeper into this narrow path and look at my story, my ancestor story, immigrant story, it's a Michigan story, I just feel that it becomes more universal. And I think that's why I'm able to sort of like make more connections.
That makes so much sense because, your journey of self-discovery is unique to you and your your circumstances and your past and history, but everybody is engaged and that's the premise of Pizza Quest really, is everybody is on a journey of self-discovery through their own unique specifics. But that's the part that's universal, is that everybody is on their own quest. And
yes,
the metaphors
absolutely.
that guide your quest are, whether it's the like where pizza is mine, maybe kimchi becomes the metaphor for you, but it's a journey that converges for all of us somewhere along the line. And I think you're right. That insight of it being, the deeper you go, the more we start to merge with this sort of universal. We call them our kindred spirits, the other people that are on the same journey with us. So what have you discovered about yourself in your journey? Yeah. Knowing that it's a journey in process, it's a work in process, and I think that's good, because that means you're still deeply engaged in it. The fire is still burning.
Yeah.
What are you finding?
Well, I've already said that I discovered that I don't know much, and there's just so much more to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've also discovered that I love the process of that discovery. I am not a Buddhist at all, but there's this story where, like, you are burdened by the world and you have a question that you need answer to, but you cannot figure it out. You go to the temple and you talk to the monk, and the monk says, if you take 1,000 vows, you'll figure it out. So then you start taking 1,000 vows and 1,000 vows and 1,000 vows. And then the story goes like, while people do that, going through that process of taking 1,000 vows, most people, almost everybody, sort of figures out their own answer. And, cooking or running a business or anything I do on the path to self-discovery is sort of like that. Maybe the end goal is not the discovery itself, but when you're in there every day making buns or making kimchi, and then you try to make each step better, just little by little every day. And by doing that action, I feel that that's where the discovery lies.
Yeah. And that I think that's interesting that the master, the Buddhist master, doesn't have to have the answers for you. He just provides a way for you to get your own answers.
Yeah.
So you've been, and again, we all go through our 10,000 or 20,000 hours of doing something over and over again until we have these breakthrough moments or insights or become really good and masterful at them. What is it like? What are the things that you do then in order to have brought your restaurant into manifestation, into being? What are the things that you have to do both each day and building up to it to make it happen? Well,
I think you have to have a good balance of your daily challenges and trials and tribulations, and then keeping an eye on the big picture. So some of the big picture stuff that I do, I really love is I'm lucky enough to still really am fluent in Korean and read Korean. So and Korea still has huge interest in historical cooking. So it was never my plan to go to culinary school. By the time I was done with University of Michigan, I didn't have the time or the money to go to another college. And I wasn't going to go to a culinary school in Korea. And the culinary school here wasn't going to provide what I wanted, the education I wanted, because I wanted the Korean food education. So I started digging deeper into, the world of Amazon, so to speak. And then I started ordering books from Korea and then started reading, because I thought, I knew I wanted to put my own spin on dishes that I grew up loving. But if I were going to do that, I wanted to do it with integrity and respect. And in order for me to do that, then I wanted to understand the story of the dish. It must have changed throughout the centuries and the years, and I wanted to know how it has changed, and understanding that story, and then also the story of people who made those dishes and enjoyed those dishes, made me feel like if I at least knew that, then I feel like I've earned a little bit of room to put a little spin on that on my own. So a lot of that work is thinking big picture on Korean food and Korean American food. That's not necessarily fusion. So that's the bigger picture work. And I also think about like my identity as a female leader and an immigrant woman, and how that experience reflects into the policies of the restaurant and the company that I run. So that's the bigger picture.
Yeah. You have that political science background and economics, and so you that's all weaved into your work.
Yeah, I mean, that's informed by my life experience, right? Because if your life is directly impacted and you feel it every day because you're on a student visa or you're out of status, then you are going to be aware more of legal implications on somebody. Or if you struggle with money, then you're going to be more aware of money.
Yeah.
So like for me, that comes into play in every decision I try to make for the restaurant. And then on daily basis, we have a very small kitchen. We have a very small crew, and staff shortages a lot. And I try to make sure the working environment is good and people are paid living wage and benefits. Mm-hmm. That's good for them, and it makes me sound really good. But also, if you don't do that, you don't get to keep people. If you don't have people, you don't have a restaurant. So it's also very driven by self-interest as well.
Well, yeah, and that's a big challenge, especially today. But before we go to break, and when we come back from break, I want to talk more about Miss Kim and the food you're serving there. But I did one before we break. I just wanted to ask you, I know that all the self-study, the books that you read, both in the source languages and everything else, are there any books that you can recommend to, our viewers and listeners that are written in English even, that would help them become more steeped in traditional Korean cuisine? And then when we come back, we'll talk about how traditional cuisine sort of reflects itself with the twists and turns that you've put on it to make it personally your cuisine.
Okay, that sounds great.
So before break, any books you want to throw out there for people to think about that were helpful to you?
Yeah. Let's see. The Korean cookbooks are kind of tough because a lot of Korean cookbooks in English, until very recently, has been like a compendium of these are a whole bunch of Korean dishes you can try at home. Yeah. And so I would recommend one book, and that book is it's called I think it's called Beauty of 100 Korean Dishes or something like that. It's readily available on Amazon, and it doesn't share that many stories, but it does have the most commonly beloved Korean dishes. What's good about the cookbook is that it is written by a woman whose job is to sort of standardize and document Korean food. So all the measurements are available in volume as well as weight. And there are often step-by-step pictures. So if you're thinking about cooking Korean food at home and approaching it, and you want sort of like a very straightforward, traditional Orthodox recipe, that's a good place to go. The translation is a little wonky, but because it's accompanied with the step-by-step pictures, it's a little easier to follow. So I think that one is really good. And then another one that I recommend is, it's actually recently come out, Korean American by Eric Kim. Yeah, I think that's a super interesting cookbook because it's sort of like validating the experience of Korean Americans and what we eat at home. Mm-hmm. As opposed to, there's a lot of stories of like, if I go to an Asian restaurant and it's not full of people who don't speak English and everything's under $9, then it's not authentic. So it takes sort of this like terror of authenticity that's tied to cheaper price away from it. And sort of it validates the experiences of Korean American people here and how delicious the food that we make here can be. I think those two books I'd recommend.
Well, I love Korean cuisine, and I remember getting a tour of Koreatown out just outside of Washington, D.C., and I can't even remember the name of the town. I just think of it as Koreatown, and we got to go to a few, terrific restaurants. And again, I don't know if what we were eating then would be considered Americanized versions of Korean classics, or if they were the Korean classics themselves. But the food was, the flavors were just so vibrant and alive. And of course, I don't know, technically alive. I mean, all the the living, the fermentation and the kimchi's and everything that was happening there was just, it was exciting. It was invigorating to eat food like that. And so, where I live in Charlotte, we have only a couple of Korean restaurants, and probably nothing of the caliber that, I was getting up there or what you're doing where you are. So we want to explore that when we come back from the break. We're with Ji-Hae Kim, who is the founder, creator, the chef at Miss Kim in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And talk a little bit maybe when we come back about, where you see all of this going in the future. And if you have any plans to do any writing of your own and kind of get this all down, in books for the next generation. Okay. So we'll be back in just a second. Thanks for joining us on Pizza Talk. And we'll be back in part 2 with Ji-Hae. Stick around for more Pizza Quest after a word from our sponsor.
This episode is brought to you by 818 Tequila. 818 creates their tequila using traditional methods at a family-owned and operated distillery in Jalisco, Mexico. 818 is created from fully matured blue agave from the Los Altos and Valles regions of tequila. It is then slow-cooked for over 30 hours, extracted using traditional Tahona wheels, distilled twice in copper pot stills, and aged in American and French oak barrels. This process creates the best-tasting, highest-quality tequila possible. Their tequilas have received over 20 blind tasting awards. They strive for excellence in every sip. 818's Blanco is sweet and smooth, with undertones of tropical and citrus fruits. Their Reposado is soft and balanced with notes of caramel and vanilla. Their Añejo is elegant and velvety, with crisp herbal notes and a warm vanilla finish. Visit drink818.com to learn more about their tequila and find it near you. 818 Tequila, imported by 818 Spirits, Manhasset, New York, 40% alcohol by volume. Drink responsibly.
Welcome back to Pizza Quest, and I'm with Ji-Hae Kim. I'm saying it right, Ji-Hae, right? You spell it H-Y-E, but Ji-Hae Kim of Miss Kim in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Tell me a little bit about Miss Kim. I mean, I know that we've talked about how you kind of made it your own, the twist, but I was reading some of the menu items, and of course got me very excited when you got a Buddhist silken tofu soup. So there's a little bit of a shout out to that Buddhist tradition, even though you yourself are not, you wouldn't consider yourself a practicing Buddhist per se, but it seems like you want to honor those traditions, at the restaurant.
Yeah. So at Miss Kim, the food that we do, I say that it's inspired by our ancestors and our farmers. So it's very much rooted in like Korean culinary tradition and history, but it's also married with the Michigan farmers and produce. And a lot of it comes from like my studies into Korean food. So because I don't have a culinary degree at all, and I don't have I really didn't have any classical training. I looked into books a lot, and I've mentioned that I thought I knew Korean food, but then the more I look into it, the less I feel that I know, and there's just so much to dig into. What I discovered was the diversity of Korean food. There's just so many angles that you can go at it, and it's just unbelievable. So like Buddhist cuisine would be another one, and I found it really fascinating because Buddhist cuisine, it's vegan, but it's a lot more than that. It's a philosophy in sustainability, because the waste is really not allowed. And it's a philosophy in local food. Everything needs to come from certain radius, either foraged or donated or farmed from the temple. So it's very local. And because it's local, it's also very seasonal. You're not supposed to use 5 this exciting like aromatics. So you're not supposed to use garlic or chives or onions or those allium families. You're not allowed to use because it's considered like too passion inducing.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah. So then that sort of like creates a section of Korean food. Like, most people know Korean food as like a spicy and intense flavors. But then here's this cuisine that's milder and disciplined and really focused on ingredients. So that's why the Buddhist cuisine was also very interesting. And Buddhist cuisine uses a lot more spices than current Korean cooking. For example, they use sansho peppers and Szechuan peppercorns, which is not as widely used in a regular, like everyday Korean cooking.
Uh-huh.
So I get some inspiration from that. I get inspirations from regional Korean cooking. So like, let's take bibimbap, which is like one of the most popular and well-known, beloved Korean dishes.
Yeah, that's sort of the one dish that almost everybody. That's the beginner dish, right? That's a easy but there isn't
to Korean
just
food.
one. There's not just one version of bibimbap, right? There's I think on your menu you celebrate at least 3 different versions, right?
Yeah, Korea's not a big country. I think it's smaller than many United States. Definitely smaller than Texas. But it's geographically varied. So it's peninsula, it's like 70% mountainous. So the bibimbap you get in a mountainous area may have mushrooms and dried greens and stuff like that. And bibimbap you get from seaside town will have seaweed and raw fish or fish roe or even cooked fish in it or clams. So even with one dish, you get this beautiful variety and different versions of it. And I wanted to showcase that. So that's where some of the other inspirations come from. So every time I look into Korean food, there's so much to draw from.
For our listeners who are not that familiar with Korean cuisine, maybe our pizza listeners who are just so focused on the world of pizza that they haven't had a lot of exposure to the Korean, style. What exactly is bibimbap, and what makes it sort of that iconic dish with a lot of flexibility?
Well, in that sense, bibimbap sort of kind of pizza.
Pizza of Korea.
Yeah. So bibimbap is, generally speaking, it's a bowl of grains on the bottom and variety of toppings on top. And it has a red sauce that comes on the side. And you can throw the red sauce and mix everything and eat it together with all the ingredients in harmony. So that's bibimbap. It's not necessarily set of ingredients. Most typical, well-known bibimbap is modeled after Jeonju bibimbap, which comes from the southern west side of the country, and that has white rice and various different vegetables, probably anywhere between 3 to 5. And then some beef, either raw or a cooked beef that's chopped so it like mixes well, not a huge chunks, and then fried egg on top. And then it's served with a gochujang on the side. So this is usually the typical bibimbap you see, especially in the United States. But so there's really many different kinds.
This proliferation of bowl cuisine throughout the United States is really just a play off of bibimbap then. Right. I mean, it's sort of like draw its connection to that style.
I would definitely claim that. Yeah. If you had acai bowl, that's Korean. I'm just gonna claim that.
That's it, right? Yeah, and it's become, and obviously one of the reasons why that dish is so popular is because it works as a flavor concept. It delivers tremendous amount of flavor with diverse ingredients, and I think
texture. Every bite.
Yeah. So and a lot of times when I write about food, I'm always talking about, whether it works or doesn't. Does it deliver flavor or doesn't it deliver flavor? And that's the key to the whole game. And bowls, if they're constructed correctly with the right balance of flavors, are a wonderful flavor delivery system.
Yeah, and I would say also like very balanced in like oftentimes, okay, so when you're building bibimbap, you're looking for balance and harmony. So in color and texture and flavor, but also in like nutrition. So it's not a super heavy dish, yet it has the protein, the carbs, and the vegetables and all the stuff in there. So yeah, that's totally Korean.
Yeah. So when you do your bibimbaps at Miss Kim, what are you, obviously I think you said you're drawing not only on the sort of the traditional idea, but also your relationship with the farmers. So you're bringing in this other thing that's become very popular in this country, which is, it took us forever to catch up to the other countries in understanding that we must work with our farmers, and that the cuisine's as much a result of what's being grown around us as it is about the spices and the concept that, was in its heritage.
Yeah, I think most, like, I always say Korean food is regional. Korean food needs to be regional. It needs to be really like pay homage to where it's actually being cooked, and then it needs to be seasonal. But that's not unique to Korean food. That's unique to most traditional food. And I would say that was probably the case for United States. Us not doing the not losing connection with the local farmers is a very recent thing. It's a 20th century thing. And I am hoping that we are coming back from that. And it makes sense in terms of flavor, because vegetables in season taste vastly better than the vegetables that you just get from a grocery store out of season. The color, it's more beautiful, color is more vibrant. It's cheaper in season if you buy from the farmers. And so it makes an economic sense. So when we do bibimbap at Miss Kim, we sort of try to break the mold of the most popular, well-known version of bibimbap, which is the one that I described, but sort of go by the different set of rules. So like the set of rules we have is like, does it have 5 colors? So those colors are, it's called 오방색. It's 5 colors of the universe. So it's red, yellow, white, green, and black, or like green or blue and black, right? So your bowl should have lots of colors. Your bowl should have locally sourced stuff. If I am making a Buddhist version, then I would go one step further and make sure that there's no allium put into that.
Would there also be no meat? Would the Buddhist version be meatless?
Exactly. It'll be meatless, and then we'll also have no egg. But then you're extracting most flavor out of what's in that bowl, because we use multigrain, which has more flavor, maybe wild rice from the Midwestern region, and local vegetables and microgreens to make that happen. So we sort of like use ingredients more interchangeably, but we play by our own rules based on what I like took away from studies into Korean food.
But also you're a restaurant, and so you have to give the customers what they want and desire. Which versions do you find that, and which dishes that you're making there, aside from the bibimbap, are the dishes that your customers just crave and want more of?
Oh, so this is a fun story. So rice cakes is one of the most popular dishes that we have. And when we opened the restaurant 5.5 years or so, before that, I was doing pop-up dinners at a friend's bar, like testing out some of these dishes. And all the Korean friends that I have are like, oh, American people don't like rice cakes. They don't like the texture. They don't like the sort of like soft, chewy thing. Like nobody's going to buy that dish. And I had a feeling that if it was tasty enough, people will buy it. And it has since become the most popular dish on the menu.
Am I saying this right? Is this the one that says, is it Hyokbaki? Am I saying that correctly?
Close. Tteokbokki.
Say it again.
Tteokbokki.
Oh, so boki.
Yeah, tteokbokki. And I think it's, and then our step likes to call it boki because it's easier.
Yeah, it's definitely easier.
Yeah.
But it was described as being a royale style. Is what makes it a royale style.
Oh, yeah. So like most, the most quintessential version is the ones that you can easily find on the streets of Korea. That's basically rice cakes are like a cooked rice that's pounded and turned into like a stick shape, oftentimes like round batang shape. And then you sort of cook that down with some gochujang chili paste and some umami rich stock. And then you can sell that on the street, and it's really cheap and really available, and people love it. It's kind of like soul food.
Is it crispy on the outside and soft and chewy on the inside, or is it not crispy?
It is not the street version. It's just soft all around. If anything, like it reminds people of gnocchi. So if we've had like Italian gnocchi, that would be the texture. And I wanted to put this on the menu, but I wanted it to be a little different. And so I thought the texture needed to improve, because the original, like if you look at the history of that dish, it didn't always have gochujang in it. And it wasn't always a braised dish where it sits in a sort of sauce for a long time. It was a saute dish that was soy sauce based with lots of different ingredients that had a lot more vegetables in there. So I created the version that's inspired by the streets version, street food. And because I actually like the even cheaper version of that dish, where it's just skewered rice cake that's deep fried, so it's crispy on the outside and soft and chewy inside.
I think that's what I think Americans really go for, that concept of the crisp and chewy both.
Oh yeah, I think Koreans as well. Yeah,
that's another universal.
yeah. Crispy on the outside, moist and soft on the inside. Yeah, like
something about
chicken.
That combo. Yeah, it's just like intoxicating.
Absolutely. So I created a version that has a lot more textural interest to it. It was quickly sautéed rather than braised for a long time. And then because me looking into that dish yielded knowledge into this other dish that's been documented from 18th century. It's known as a palace cooking. It wasn't like street cooking at all. I mean, that dish is such an interesting story, where it comes from like soy sauce based pan fried dish with lots of expensive ingredients that the kings and queens loved in the palace, down to after Korean War, it's a braised dish in a completely different sauce with completely different texture, and then not a lot of vegetables and not a lot of meat in it. And it's one of the cheapest you can find in Korea. So I wanted to show sort of like the progression of that dish by presenting a couple of different versions of it.
Cool. Well, and let me see. I think I noticed another dish that it caught my attention is this fried caramel broccolini with an anchovy caramel. What do you caramelize anchovies to make this dish work?
No, actually, caramelized anchovy is one of my favorite side dishes of Korean food. So Korean table is consisted of rice, which is a starch. Maybe it has a soup, maybe it has some meat, but it has tiny little side dishes called banchan. And that really rounds out the dishes, and there's incredible variety for that. And one of my favorite is the caramelized anchovies. For this dish though, we sort of make a sweeter, reduced down fish sauce based sauce. So it's anchovy based fish sauce that's cooked with dried chilies, garlic, ginger, and some sugar, and then you reduce it down so it's a little more syrupy. And then we put that on a deep fried broccolini, and then have some sort of nuts and the herbs in it. If I had my preferences, I would use peanuts, but peanuts are a pretty severe allergen, so we use cashews instead. Yeah.
But this is like a umami bomb. It sounds like.
Yeah. If you're drinking beer, this would be really good with it. And,
well, you just answered a question for me when you we have a local chain, a Korean fried chicken chain called Banchan here. But so Banchan refers to all the side dishes that go around the dish. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's sort of a catch-all phrase. And the closest translation would be sides, but banchan is so much more than just the side of pickle or side of potato salad. One of the challenges that I had coming from sort of like a eater of Korean food that's especially homemade Korean food to like a professional Korean American chef is being able to translate what I grew up with onto a table where people can understand. And banchan is a tough thing to translate because it takes so much energy, so much labor, and oftentimes it's considered like a throwaway dish. And one thing that banchan does for Korean table, besides making it really bountiful and welcoming, is that it gives a lot of autonomy to the diner. Banchan often almost always has kimchi or some sort of pickled vegetables. It has different textures and flavors on it. So when you are eating at a more typical Korean restaurant, then you get your entree, but you also get a whole bunch of sides, and then you can create your own bite. That has the acidity and the texture based on how you like it. But if you're running a restaurant and you have audience who may not be interested in having that many things on the table and pay for it, or you have an audience who just wants to have a plate and then eat that, then it is my job as a chef to make sure that that plate has all the elements that banchan would normally provide. So that's the crunch, that's the acidity, that may be a kick of spice or palate cleansing pickle. So one of the things that I think about a lot is how to translate that experience into like a one plate of food that you can have.
Interesting, because I could see myself like ordering a banchan tasting platter, with like 20 different like little bites of everything, and taking a tour basically through the Korean food lexicon.
Oh, that is one of my favorite ways to eat Korean food for sure.
Is it? Oh, good. Well, when I get to Ann Arbor and I come to Miss Kim, I want you to take me through one of those tours. I can't wait. And before we run out of time, let me just ask you this. You created Miss Kim as an extension of your work originally with Zingerman's. Is Zingerman's a partner with you in this? And how did you and Zingerman's, how did this come into being in that relationship?
Miss Kim is part of Zingerman's community of businesses, and they are my business partner. So I am considered a managing partner. So I run day-to-day operation. I have a say in everything. And then I have investing partners in Paul and Ari, who founded Zingerman's, and they are my sounding board, my advisors. We make big, important decisions together. We operate under the same set of mission guiding principles, and we have like big goals together, but they will be the first ones to admit that they don't know that much about Korean food other than really enjoying it. So,
they're like you're managing. They're they're like the Danny Meyer of Miss Kim, and you are the chef partner.
Yes.
Are you located right there in the same location as Zingerman's, or do you have your own separate location away from the mother house?
The Zingerman's businesses are all over Ann Arbor and Ann Arbor vicinity, like Dexter area, and we're all sort of like our own little spots. But my place happened to be just 2 blocks away from the delicatessen. So if you ever come over, I'm gonna feed you Reuben with the most amazing rye bread, and I want to make sure that the Russian dressing's like dripping over your arm, and you're stuffed. And then once you digest that, we're gonna go to my restaurant and have some Korean food.
I would not go to Zingerman's without getting a Reuben, that's for sure. Oh gosh. Well, Jihye, this has been really fun and exciting for me, and thank you so much for sharing your story, your knowledge. Congratulations on your success. I know that your reputation, the reputation of Miss Kim, is extending now beyond Ann Arbor, or maybe people are coming to Ann Arbor just mainly to experience your food, which is quite a tribute to the work you've done. And one of the things that I love also is how organically it all came into being. It wasn't from some master plan. It evolved over time through your experience and essentially connecting the dots of your own personal journey to manifest something that's uniquely both a traditional Korean restaurant and also a uniquely Jihye Kim restaurant. That's a one of a kind. So congratulations on all of that. Oh, and I did say I was going to ask you, any plans to write a book of your own?
I would love I would love to have a either cookbook or something like book on Korean food. Yeah. I think that would be just a dream. Yeah.
Well, let me know when you're ready. I'd be happy to help you get it off the ground and connect you with whoever you need to make it happen. Although I think with all the people there, especially the Zingerman's team, they're about as connected as you can get. But if I could be of any help to get your voice out there, we'd love to have you be a part of it. And thank you for sharing your quest, with all of our Pizza Quest tribe, and have now extended the parameters of what our quest focus is at Pizza Quest. So again, thanks for
thank you so much for your kind words. I had so much fun. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. We'll look forward maybe to getting you back again. I've got to look for, I'll be talking to Jeff and Brad, my partners at Pizza Quest, and see how can we get back on the road again and include Ann Arbor in this swing. So, because it's been a long time.
Yes, please come.
I'd love it. Well, have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you for all of this. And thank all of you for joining us on Pizza Quest today. And we'll see you at the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
This show is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.